everybody. Welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co-host with me, Whitestone.
It is undeniable that a vast proportion of the actual doctrines and rules which make up the system of equity are necessarily inferences from or direct applications of some or more of these fundamental maxims.
The power is neutral. It's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. Behind using these things are good and holy and Christ-like.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. This is episode 5. We've made it here on our journey through the equity maxims to he who comes into equity must come with clean hands. Before we get there, though, got to get through the business. I am your host, Dustin William, the owner and producer at True Life Productions. You can find all of our content at truelifeproduction.com, including All Aboard, where I do deep dives into the orphan trains and a lot of other historically relevant events of that particular time, especially in New York. And then from there, you can head to Article 3 Articulations, where you can find the most comprehensive breakdown of the slaughterhouse cases there is on the internet. And then from there, you can head to the Thought Crime Dojo, where it's just a compendium of resources where you can follow my research as it happens. So that takes care of the business. Let's get right into this today. I'm excited to talk about this maxim: he who comes into equity must come with clean hands. Before we get to that, though, let's introduce our co-host, Whitestone. How's it going, man?
I'm doing well. I'm really looking forward to getting into this one because I've said this for probably all of the maxims, but really this one is kind of the crux of getting equity. And anytime you go into court or anytime you're dealing with anybody, you have to be doing everything on your end very honorably, and you can't have any kind of unconscionable act or bad faith in the process of trying to get justice. Otherwise, the court's going to see that, and they're going to throw your case out.
Yeah. I think this is a really important maxim to hit because, it is one of the most important things in the entire scope of equity jurisprudence. Is you got to come in here with clean hands, or you're not going to get remedy at all. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it, jumping right back into Murray F. Tully's speech to the bar in 1903 in Illinois. We've made it to page 24 so far, and this is maxim number 4 that Tully puts in here, and that is, he who comes into equity must come with clean hands. And we're just going to read this verbatim into the record. The above maxim, as stated by Pomeroy, is substantially in the same form as given by Bisbane and Beach. Story does not give this maxim at all, which I find interesting. Francis states it differently from the others and in form preferred by some as follows: he that hath committed inequity shall not have equity. This maxim, stated in such homely phrases, lays down a rule which guides and regulates courts of equity in the administration of any and every species of relief. It says, in substance, that he who seeks to set a court of equity in motion and obtain relief, if he himself has violated conscience, good faith, or any equitable principle in reference to the same subject matter, then the doors of the court will be closed against him in limine, which I didn't get a chance to pull that definition, but I'm assuming that means like forever, right? Do you know the definition of that one?
So No, I looked into my Latin dictionary and I couldn't find it. And I believe I had looked into Bouvier's and I could not find it either. Let me double check. But just taking the root of the word, it looks like closed against him. LIM seems to be the beginning of the word limit, like you're limited because you've
Hmm.
done something that you shouldn't have done. The court of equity is going to be very limited in what the type of equity or justice it's going to grant you because of your missteps or your misdeeds. But I guess while you keep reading, let me see if I can find that
Okay.
definition.
Yeah, perfect. Um, that the court, okay, so then the doors of the court will be closed against him in Lamine. That the court will refuse to interfere in his behalf or award him any remedy. Pomeroy says of this maxim, although not the source of any distinctive doctrines, it furnishes a most important and even universal rule affecting the entire course of equitable jurisprudence as a system of remedies and of remedial rights. One of the most common cases to which the maxim is applied is in the equitable remedy for the specific performance of contract, which we talked about in the last episode. It is a familiar doctrine that specific performance will be refused where the complainant has obtained the agreement by sharp practice, overreaching, unfair concealment of facts, by taking undue advantage of his position, or by other unconscionable means, or where the contract is one sided, unconscionable, or even where the specific performance would be harsh and unduly oppressive upon the defendant, or would in any manner work injustice. It refuses specific performance in such cases because the complainant does not come into the court with clean hands. A court of equity will apply the principle of the maxim where the complainant's claim is affected by his own fraud and leave him to his remedy if he has any at law.
Oh,
Where well,
oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna, I thought that was the end of where you're reading, but I did look up the word limitation in Bouvier, and it seems to be right in line with what we're talking about. And as regards the doors of equity being closed. So the definition limitation is actually used in remedies. And it's a
Mm.
bar to the alleged right of a plaintiff to recover in an action caused by the lapse of certain time appointed by law, or it is the end of time appointed by law during which a party may sue or recover a right. It's a maxim of the common law that a right never dies, and as far as contracts were concerned, there was no time of limitation to actions on such contracts. And it actually limitation actually goes through every single state. It lists every single state and the jurisprudence where limitation was used in remedies.
Oh wow.
And just a quick glance over it, it looks like it's right in line with what we're talking about, that if a party sits on their rights or it's unconscionable or the contract's one-sided, then the court is going to be very limited in how it adjudicates.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds exactly like what we were looking for there. Nice. Okay, perfect. Look at us learning out loud. Nice. All right. And yeah, let me read this last little paragraph here. Where a contract has been entered into to accomplish a fraudulent purpose, a court of equity will neither compel its execution nor decree its cancellation, nor if executed, will it set aside or restore the property or other interest fraudulently obtained or transferred. In other words, it refuses relief to either of the fraudulent participants. This rule is also applied to contracts where which are illegal, prohibited by law, or malum in se, as contrary to public policy and good morals. There is some limitation upon the doctrine as applied to such contracts where the parties are not in peri delicito, and relief may be given upon the grounds of public policy. Um, yeah, I think
That to
I,
me basically is saying the exact same thing, that if you, they'll just throw you back to the at law side
mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's what basically what public policy is. And malum in se, if I'm not mistaken, is Latin for malicious in and of itself or bad in and of itself. You know, like a
Mm,
contract which
mhm.
basically says that you're going to do an immoral thing or you promise to do an immoral thing or whatever it is. It's malicious in and of itself. Yeah, they'll just kick you back to the outlaw side or just tell you to go away.
Yeah, yeah, that was the point I was going to bring up. That's why I think it's just another point to bring in the distinction between equity and at law. A court of equity will apply this principle of maxim where the complainant's claim is affected by his own fraud and leave him to his remedy if he has any at law, if any he has at law. So they're just gonna kick him right back to the outlaw side, and you might have remedy and you might not, but a court of equity doesn't care because you came in with clean hands, so they basically throwing you right back to the wolves.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important, for a lot of people that are, looking at managing their own affairs. Every single thing that you do, every pen that you put to paper, every word that you speak to, whether it's a county clerk or it's a judge or some commissioner that won't leave you alone, whatever you do, you have to do it honorably. You can't be belligerent. You
Hmm.
cannot
Hmm.
act in any sort of way that gives them a reason to take away your right or to ignore your claim. And so you kind of, even if you are being treated as a belligerent or, there are assumptions made about your claims, you kind of just have to let it bounce off your cheek and roll off your back and just stay the course and be honorable, and be honest.
This is because this really a lot of this is a psychological game. And a lot of this is designed to get you in a state of belligerency because
Absolutely.
they want you to act like an enemy belligerent so they can treat you like an enemy belligerent.
Yeah, because that is the only way that they can move on you and enforce, public law or statutes on you is if you yourself have either waived or moved yourself out of equity, and you do that by your actions, and
Hmm.
by your behavior. And because they can't, because a lot of people think they're, oh, they're taking our rights away, they're trampling all your rights and things like that. A lot of it actually is how you behave and how you
Hmm.
act and how you interact with a lot of these people and the system. So if you're not, you just have to ignore it, and stay honorable. Otherwise, they will treat you the way they want you. They
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah, that's not to say there isn't malicious shit going on out there. Obviously, what happened in 1933 was very malicious, and the whole point behind it was to create debt slavery. But at the end of the day, they still have to give us remedy for everything.
They have to, yeah.
Yeah,
Unless you're acting like an enemy, rebel, or
exactly.
belligerent, you've
Yeah.
waived all of that. So that's what a lot of people need to understand is that, stop screaming, stop protesting, stop writing things online and saying things, because every time you do that, you're putting yourself on the map as an enemy. And if you're
Hmm.
putting yourself on the map as an enemy or belligerent, that's the game that's going to be played with you. Whereas if you are going to make a claim, whether it's your status or whether you have some sort of equitable remedy, whatever it might be, you really have to stay the course and play the good game. That way you're treated that way.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
so I will go ahead and pick up, unless you got anything else, I'll pick up where you left off.
Nope. Yep. Let's keep proving.
All right, so continuing on, the earliest reported case in which the principle of this maxim was applied appears to be in Middle May versus Middle May, decided in 1682. So there again, another 400 years of equity
Hmm.
jurisprudence. Decided in 1682. The case is as follows. The wife being divorced, amensa et thoro, which, if you look up the Latin, it's a version of separation, which I don't think is an actual divorce decree. I think it's just a court-ordered, um, sort of separation. Because I think back then there were different types of separations and divorces depending on who had what claim in the estate, whether, the husband had granted a piece of his estate to his wife and they were divorced, but she still had a claim. There was different, I think, divorce arrangements for that.
The equity is huge in
Yeah.
divorce cases and
So the
stuff.
wife,
Yeah.
being divorced, amensa et thoro, exhibited a bill in chancery against her husband to reach certain rentals which had become due upon a previous £50 per annum settlement by him. The defendant answered that she was a lewd woman, had eloped from her husband, he offering to take her back again. The chancellor refused any relief except that the defendant should stand in place of the tenants, admit the rents, and then she might proceed at law to recover the rents if she could. Another interesting case is that of Redmond versus Redmond, where in a treaty of marriage, interesting they call marriage a treaty, Where in a treaty of marriage it was agreed that a certain bond owing by the intended bridegroom should be taken up and canceled. This was done by the substitution of a new bond, which was given by the brother of the intended husband, the proposed bride executing a security to the obligators in the new bond for their satisfaction. The father, who knew nothing about the new bond or the indemnity given by the daughter in regard to the same, was drawn into giving his daughter a greater portion, having refused to consent to the marriage until the husband should be made a clear man. That was in quotes. The marriage took place, the husband died, and the new bond being presented as a claim against the husband's estate, the wife, as
Optics.
administratix.
Hmm.
It's weird because they that suffix atix or trix they usually would put at the end when a woman occupied that office, like the
Oh,
executive
okay.
or the administrator. So if you see that at the end, what they're talking about is somebody operating in some sort of capacity who is a woman,
Oh,
and
so it's
that's just
actually gendered in the is that
yeah, there
American? Is
actually
that
is
English?
gendered language. There is gendered language in equity, because that
Oh,
gives the court and that gives the jury or whoever else an idea about the rights of the plaintiff or the rights of whoever it is that's operating that capacity and what their gender are, because they are treated differently depending on what the situation
yeah.
is.
Yeah, especially in
So
divorce cases, women and men are treated very differently.
so yeah, in this case, she was basically acting as administratix or administratrix.
Mm-hmm.
So she filed a bill to be relieved in that capacity. It appears that the husband supposed that the original bond upon which he had been obligated had been paid, and knew nothing of the new bond nor of the security indemnity given therefor by the wife to the brother. The Lord Chancellor held that if this bond shall be suffered to lie on Charles, the husband, estate, it might swallow up the assets and defraud his creditors. And in concluding his opinion, he says, you admit the husband might have been relieved on a bill brought by him and his wife. That which was once a fraud will be always so, and the accident of a woman surviving the husband will not better the case. So decreed that the bond be delivered up and a perpetual injunction granted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because it looks like they went behind his back and made a bond to get something out of his estate, which they were not aware of. And the court said, well, are in, just because that bond was made, you can't go ahead and file a claim or put a bill in for that claim if the other parties didn't know, and it would do injustice to his estate and to his creditors. So they threw it
Hmm.
out.
Yeah, she was on some sneaky shit for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because when he said that they were divorced and that she was a lewd woman, had eloped from her husband, and he had even offered to take her back again, they refused any relief. And a lot of that is because, again, she did not have clean hands coming in to make the claim.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that which was once a fraud will always be so. Because
Exactly.
and equity goes all throughout time, so it doesn't matter. There's really no statute of limitations in equity. It can go,
No, it's not.
you can time travel pretty much. So,
So it's
uh,
also interesting because once he was dead, she was in charge of administering the state, right? Because it said that she was
oh
administratrix.
yeah, 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 yep, yep.
So she had also filed a bill against his estate for for the performance of this new bond, which both the sounds like her father, and the husband didn't know about. And so, that's kind of unconscionable because there's no meeting of the minds. He didn't
Yeah,
agree to it, didn't realize there was another bond.
yeah, yeah. She was just thinking she was justified in taking some stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
No, no. All right. Yeah, unless you got something else, I'll go ahead and read this last little section here.
No, actually, I wanted to put in real quick. That right
Okay.
there is kind of a glimpse into how the family court, I guess what you could call it back then, was still looking at justice for anybody and everybody, whereas
Mm.
nowadays it's just a cash cow.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on family court.
I,
Still
I
the
really
most
think we should
fucking
do I really
disgusting
think we
thing
should
out
do an
there.
episode on the modern family court, and how it is not absolutely not an equitable jurisdiction. And without giving anybody any sort of advice, if they are going to be going into family court, they need to come in armed with equity language, equity maxims, and those sorts of claims. Because if you go in at the at law side, even with evidence or counter
Yeah,
evidence
it's yeah.
or anything like that, they're just going to completely throw it out, and it's going to be
Yeah.
like traffic court for you.
Yeah, my family court case, the judge said, "Well, this is just how we always do it."
Yeah,
That's
it's tradition
literally
and it's
what she said.
it's post 1938 tradition
Yep.
and at law precedent.
Yep.
So,
Because I
yep,
proved to them at the outlaw side they didn't have jurisdiction. And we just came to a standstill in the court and she goes, "Well, sir, this is just how we always do it."
yep,
And so I'm like, what do I say to that? What
yeah. It's
it's,
like,
okay.
right
It's
on, man.
yeah, so I was like, you know what? All right, then. So let it be put on the record that anything that any action taken by me from this point forward is under threat, duress, and coercion.
There you
So
go.
I guess here we go. Yep. So
Yeah, but even at the at law side, they'll allow you to say put it on the record, but when you go back later and look, they'll take it right off.
yeah, which luck I was recording it too, so I got my own
Oh,
transcripts. Haha.
right on.
Yeah, but anyways, let's not get too far into that. Yeah. Let me read this last little bit here. I find it is not uncommon for solicitors who have not become thoroughly imbued with the spirit and meaning of this maxim to seek to have it applied in matters not growing out of the transaction complained of or necessarily connected with. I remember one case before me where there was a bill for specific performance of a contract for the sale of a house. Oh, excuse me. The younger solicitor for the defendant attempted to set up and prove that after the complainant had taken possession of the house under the contract, she had turned it she had turned it into an ass
Assignation?
assignation house. I have no idea what that is.
It sounds like she was subleasing maybe, because like, if you become an
Oh,
assign
right.
if you
Turned it
become an
into an assignation.
assignee, it's because
Yeah,
someone
okay.
has assigned some sort of right of occupancy or whatever to you. So maybe that's
Right,
what she
right.
did.
Yeah, she's leasing out rooms in it then. So yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, okay. And he therefore claimed that the complaint was not entitled to relief because she did not come into equity with clean hands. It is well settled that the court will not go out of the case at bar and examine the conduct of the complainant as to the other matters or question his general character, and that the misconduct as to which relief will be denied must be in regard to the very matter in litigation.
No.
And,
So it has to be, if you have dirty hands somewhere else, but it's not connected to the case, equity is going to say, well, it's like whatever the matter before the court is.
mhm.
If they came in with clean hands, it doesn't matter if in some other matter that's not at issue before us, we're not going to take that into consideration.
Yeah, yeah, I like this little point here too, because yeah, it's actually I think in the precision case this comes up. Um because they were trying to prove somebody was a dirtbag outside of the case, and they're like, that doesn't have anything to
And
do
that's
with
really
this.
what it is. It's like,
Yeah,
if it's basically, if they don't have an argument, they just start pulling from somewhere else. It's like, oh yeah, well, he puts pineapple on pizza, so
right.
it's like, you're right, that has nothing to do with him buying the house, sir. Nobody cares what his disgusting eating habits are. It's like, that has nothing to do with this case, even though, yeah, sure, it might have been unconscionable or immoral or whatever. It has nothing to do with this particular issue. Therefore, we're not going to look at it.
Yeah, and in logic, you call this poisoning the well. That's what you would do.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
it, yeah, like if you're in a debate or something, you attack the person's character before you get to the
yeah.
points of the debate, and that's called poisoning the well. So it's kind of
So
along the same
it'd be
lines.
like a straw man argument or like a red herring or an ad hominem attack where it doesn't. They're just trying to distract and sway the court for,
Yeah,
issues that are not relevant.
yeah, they're trying to taint your character, and if it doesn't have anything to do with the case, sorry, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, not how it works. All right, so that's it for what we got in Tully's speech. The maxims are getting a little shorter now, so we'll probably maybe after this next one, we'll start doubling them up
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
episodes. And so yeah, and yeah, we only got 5 episodes in these foundations left, anyways. So we'll have to start doubling stuff up. But they start getting shorter anyways, and a lot of them work together and all that stuff. So all right. And so in addition to this, in the second hour, we are going to talk about Keystone Driller Company v. General Excavator Company 290 US 240. And in that case, he actually cites Story and Pomeroy and a couple of other cases that have to do with clean hands. So I pulled, well, it's I looked for the Story citations, and I don't know if you tried to look them up, but they are not accurate at all in that case. So
Really?
yeah, I don't know where he's pulling those citations out of. I even checked equitable remedies in instead of equitable jurisprudence, equity jurisprudence, commentaries on equity jurisprudence, and I couldn't find it there either because like the what he was talking about has nothing to do with the clean hands doctrine. So
Who knows?
I
Who knows it? Maybe that was a different edition of the book or something.
well, it said the 14th edition, and I was looking, and I can't even find a 14th edition of Stories Equity.
Man, why would you go that far out? The 14th. I mean, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it yeah, it was really interesting.
either way in that case, what was his name? Either Cluster or Downey was not acting honorably in the manner in which he got the patent and then turned around and tried to enforce it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of malfeasance going on there.
Hmm. Hmm.
So either way, it's like, we know that that's kind of what they're pointing at is that he kind of obtained those patents and the consent of other individuals in a manner that was really kind of in the dark and working in iniquity.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and we'll get more into that in the second hour. But I wanted to bring it up here because he cited sections 397 and 399 out of Pomeroy's equity jurisprudence, which is where um he talks about this maxim. So,
Yeah, he
um,
really, I mean, the very first paragraph where Tully starts talking about this maxim is verbatim 397 in Pomeroy.
yeah, basically he took a lot, basically all of it from Pomeroy, pretty much. And which I mean, I guess there's really no other where else would you take it from? It's probably the best
Yeah.
source, I would imagine. Um, so yeah, I figured we could probably just read these into the record.
I
It's
think
just
so, yeah.
three little
Are you going to
sections.
read 397? Is that the plan?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I can read 397.
If
And
not, I've got it open right here. I can read it.
okay, yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, if you got it ready.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, so what we're going to be doing is I am reading out of Pomeroy's Equity Jurisprudence, third edition, circa 1906. This actually is a copy from 1906, so it's as old as, older is always better. So
Hmm.
section 397, section 4, he who comes into equity must come with clean hands, and then we have subsection 397, which is what has been referenced. So its general meaning. This maxim is sometimes expressed in the form, he that hath committed iniquity shall not have equity. Like the one described in the preceding section, it is not, in its ordinary operation and effect, the foundation and source of any equitable estate or interest, nor of any distinctive doctrine of the equity jurisprudence. It is rather a universal rule guiding and regulating the action of equity courts in their interposition on behalf of suitors for any and every purpose, and in their administration of any and every species of relief. Resembling the former maxim in this respect, it differs from that principle in some most important and essential features. In applying the maxim, he who seeks equity must do equity. As a general rule, regulating the action of courts, it is necessarily assumed that different equitable rights have arisen from the same subject matter or transaction, some in favor of the plaintiff and some in favor of the defendant. And the maxim requires that the court should, as the price or condition of its enforcing the plaintiff's equity and conferring a remedy upon him, compel him to recognize, admit, and provide for the corresponding equity of the defendant, and award to him also the proper relief. The maxim does not assume that the plaintiff has done anything unconscientious or inequitable, Much less does it refuse to him all relief. On the contrary, it grants to him the remedy to which he is entitled, but upon the condition that the defendant's equitable rights are protected by means of the remedy to which he is entitled. On the other hand, the maxim now under consideration, he who comes into equity must come with clean hands, is much more efficient and restrictive in its operation. It assumes that the suitor asking for the aid of a court of equity has himself been guilty of conduct in violation of the fundamental conceptions of equity jurisprudence, and therefore refuses him all recognition and relief with reference to the subject matter or transaction in question. It says that whenever a party who, as actor, seeks to set the judicial machinery in motion and obtain some remedy, has violated conscience or good faith or other equitable principle in his prior conduct, then the doors of the court will be shut against him in limine. The court will refuse to interfere on his behalf, to acknowledge his right, or to award him any remedy. So it's interesting because, in equity, the equitable courts absolutely have discretion on how they move through a case. And just as 397 stated, that this maxim does not really, it's not the foundation of, or source of an equitable right or an estate, but it's more of a guiding principle for the discretion of the courts, because
Hmm.
they're going to look at what rights are being claimed, or what titles are had, or who is saying what. And then they can further use this maxim and look back and say, well, up to this point, did this individual who is making the claim act honorably? If they did, then they'll go and start applying the maxims. If not, they can pull out of this one and go forward that way.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it just kind of gets kind of back to the point that we're always bolstering when we're talking here is that it's just kind of a good way to live your life by.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you just shouldn't be a dirtbag. You should go into any situation in your life with clean hands.
Because
Yeah.
later on, I mean, really, your behavior is your receipt for your for how people view you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it really does. Here's the thing: if you've done nothing but act honorably, you're the entire way through an entire situation, regardless of how mischievous or devious the party that you're dealing with, there is something very deep instilled in human beings that says, I can't proceed against this guy the way that I want to, because I would actually be breaking a universal law because they didn't do anything wrong.
And that, I mean, if we want to get right down to it, that just goes back to frequency and vibration because
Yes, it
you,
does.
you
Absolutely. Because
yep.
you are committing iniquity. If you're waiting to trip somebody up and they don't trip and you still act as if they have, right there, that's iniquity.
And yeah, you're just you're acting inconscionably, which is that's basically the whole purpose of equity is to act in your life with a clean conscience and the kind of the way I see it is you just kind of live your life by these principles and God forbid if someday you get dragged into court, you've already got all your bases covered because
Absolutely.
you've been living your life this way anyways, you know?
Yep. And if you've made mistakes or errors, you can ask for forgiveness. You can
Hmm.
reinforce what your intent was. You can go through, any affidavits or paperwork that you sent, look at your averments and look at your claims that are in there, and they'll see what the true intent was. And so if you've made a
Hmm.
mistake and the other party tries to claim that that mistake was actually based on you trying to commit fraud, then you've got all of this other evidence that shows what the true intent was, and you can squash that accusation.
And just going back to the point of like vibration and frequency, if you're coming into it with clean hands, it makes court situations a lot less scary
Yeah,
because
it really does.
you
Really
know
does.
you can stand on your own rights because you know what you're doing isn't wrong. So
100%.
it's a lot easier to stand on your stuff when there's not that little thing in the back of your mind, like, knowing that you actually did something wrong, but you actually, if you come into clean hands, that whole situation is gone. And you can go into a court completely open, completely truthful, and just pray your case because you pray your
Yep.
case in equity. And that's where you get the remedy. That's where you get
Yep.
the remedy. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I was trying to think about how well, lost my train of thought. But either
Okay.
way, it really does come down to the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. And if you truly have nothing to hide, you can stand there wide open and stand on your rights.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's continue in Pomeroy here and see what other good stuff he's got to say. This is moving on to section 398 of the same literature. Is 398 is based upon conscience and good faith, just what we were just talking about. The principles involved in this maxim is merely the expression of one of the elementary and fundamental conceptions of equity jurisprudence. We have seen that in the origin of the jurisdiction, the theory was adopted that a court of equity interposes only to enforce the requirements of conscience and good faith with respect to matters lying outside of, or sometimes perhaps opposed to, the law. The action of the court was, in pursuance of the theory, in a certain sense, discretionary. And the terms discretionary and quote unquote discretion are still occasionally used by modern equity judges while speaking of their jurisdiction and remedial functions. Whatever may be the strictly accurate theory concerning the nature of equitable interference, the principle was established from the earliest days that while the Court of Chancery could interpose and compel a defendant to comply with the dictates of conscience and good faith with regard to matters outside of the strict rules of the law, or even in contradiction to those rules, while it could act upon the conscience of the defendant and force him to do right and justice. It would never thus interfere on behalf of a plaintiff whose own conduct in connection with the same matter of transaction has been unconscious, what is unconscientious or unjust or marked by a want of good faith, or had violated any of the principles of equity and righteousness dealing which it is the purpose of the jurisdiction to sustain. While a court of equity endeavors to promote and enforce justice, good faith, uprightness, fairness, and conscientiousness on the part of the parties who occupy a defensive position in judicial controversies, it no less stringently demands the same from the litigant parties who come before it as a plaintiff or actors in such controversies. The fundamental principle is expressed in the maxim: he who comes in the court of equity must come with clean hands. And although not the source of any distinctive doctrines, it furnishes a most important and even universal rule affecting the entire administration of equity jurisprudence as a system of remedies and remedial rights. All right. Um, where are occupied by concerning the night?
It's interesting they keep referring to the plaintiff as an actor, because
Yeah.
they say that it says that, let's see, where is it here? Yeah, it no less stringently demands the same from the litigant parties who come before it as plaintiffs or actors in such controversies. And so I'm just wondering if on the at law side they refer to you as an actor.
Yeah, I guess I didn't pick up on that, but I mean, really, the court proceeding is really just a big play. And I mean, when you break it down, it's honestly just a dialectical process.
Yeah, it's really just a war of words, is all
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. It's and yeah, and the way a court where you don't um in a court proceeding, you don't necessarily come to truth. What you kind it's and it is it's a dialectical process, and when I say that is because the plaintiff has the thesis, the defendant has the antithesis, thesis, antithesis, the object and the opposite of the object, and then through the dialectical process of the argumentation, discovery, and all of that stuff, you come to the synthesis, which is the quote unquote truth. Um, and that is kind of the entire theory behind the dialectical process. And that's how these parasite fucks run the world, is through that exact process that I just
Yeah, and a lot
explained.
of it too is they have a handle on the language and the rules that guide that dialectical process more so than the average person.
Which
Which
is
is
why it's
why,
so easy for them to manipulate everybody.
yes,
Yes.
and that's why it's very important. I joke about it all the time, but it's like read the dictionary. Really,
Yeah.
the only thing that you need to get smarter is just know more words. The
That's
more words that you know, the smarter that you will appear, or the smarter that you will actually be.
yeah.
I did find the word actor in Bouvier's Law Dictionary.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
reading out of Bouvier's Law Dictionary, second edition, 1843. Actor, a plaintiff or complainant, he or on whom the burden of proof lies. In actions of replevin, both parties are said to be actors. The proctor or advocate in the courts of the civil law was called an actor.
Huh. That's pretty interesting. I had
Yeah.
never picked up on that before, but
Well, if they have been using the at law public side for a long time, to create precedents for the world that they want to create afterward, then they really would be actors. Because and this is just my own theory, I'm not basing this on anything, but I truly believe that a lot of the big major Supreme Court cases that end up shaping the way that this country thinks are, I don't want to call them false flag attacks, but they're not organic. A lot of
mm-hmm.
times the equity or outlaw jurisprudence that is established are done by, massive companies or corporations or people with influence or money, and they may in fact actually be acting. The scenario could have been concocted or manufactured in order to get it into court so that the court would rule a very particular way. That way, from then on, they can use that precedent and jurisprudence to further the machinery of control or whatever it might be. And so in that case, then a lot of these Supreme Court cases would in fact be theater because they are planned ahead of time, to a degree. And so therefore, anybody taking part in those Supreme Court cases could be seen as an actor because
I,
again, the entire world is theater. So why wouldn't they be an actor?
I mean, Shakespeare said it himself, all the world is a stage. And since you brought up this point, I'll bring up this point, and that's the big reason why at the introduction of every show I promote my deep dive that I did on the slaughterhouse cases. And I did tell everybody to go watch it because in that so when I do my Article 3 articulations, I go into like newspaper archives and then I try and find historical context behind the Supreme Court cases that I'm talking about because I want to know what is happening in the ethos.
Yeah,
What are the people feeling at that time? Because that's really what is driving these Supreme Court cases. These
absolutely.
these judges are getting away with what they think they can get away with, and they're using their language to do it. And in the slaughterhouse cases, I was going through the newspaper archives, and I found an article where they're talking about a judge being bribed before the slaughterhouse cases.
What? No,
Yes, I swear to God, dude. I swear to God. And
that never happened.
yeah, it's Judge Cooley, and it was before it got to the Supreme Court, but it was all in Louisiana that all this stuff happened. And I have emailed the Louisiana Historical Archive. They said they don't have the case, but they did direct me to the right archive that does have the case where Judge Cooley talks about it. He goes through the entire situation. I haven't gotten my hands on this case yet, but I am in the process of doing it. But that is just to bolster the point that we were just talking about here is yeah, I mean, they are all actors. And I do think all of these quote unquote landmark cases are set up by, I mean, I don't know, maybe the Jesuits,
Yeah.
because a lot of this comes out of Georgetown University. That's where a lot of the law stuff is determined. Um, So, and you know, and it really wouldn't be that far-fetched to think that's, I mean, they only do like, how many opinions do they do a year? Do you know? They get out like one or
Uh,
two a day.
yeah, well, number one, I will say it absolutely is probably Jesuit driven or high influence there because Jesuits are masters of the law. They
Hmm.
have been basically recreating this civil system that we live under for a very, very, very long time, and it's a judicial machine that they're very familiar with.
Hmm.
And I find it
Because they
also
created it.
interesting that they chose slaughterhouses and the slaughterhouse cases, which
Hmm.
basically confirmed that if you are a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, you are not entitled to the Bill of Rights, which includes civilian due process, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that was kind of the crux of the case, is they told
Yes.
these slaughterhouses and all these butchers, you got to move out of town. And they went, whoa, 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 hold on. You can't just tell it, pick up and leave and move us. It's like we have rights as citizens, and they brought suit and they basically said, no, you don't. You have to move because they were quasi corporate entities and therefore were not entitled to the Bill of Rights and civilian due process, which is why they were told you got to go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I forget who gave the opinion on the case, but in there man, he really has to dig deep to justify what he's fucking saying, dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. And in my breakdown, I really dive deep into that. And then I go into all three of the dicta cases or of the dicta opinions, the dissenting opinions. And dude, those justices are fucking pissed.
Well, I would be too, especially, if those justices truly are upset, it shows that there was a time in this country where there were honorable people who endeavored to be a justice or a magistrate or, sitting in a court to decide cases that truly believed in justice and weren't all, post 1938 werewolves.
Yeah, no, that's one of one of the reasons why I love the slaughterhouse cases so much because it actually is a shitty case. It's fucking terrible what they did. But what you see in there in the dissenting opinions, and I just brought it up over here. This is the newspaper article that I'm talking about right here. Correspondence, yeah, sixth district court in your decision. Um, Not only members of the legislation of the governor were bribed. Okay, it would appear also from the testimony in the case that not only the members of the legislature and the governor were bribed, but it was a wholesale bribery concern. Persons conducted with the newspapers for their influence, persons connected with the Republican, some connected with the Times, and a few share to some persons connected, I believe, with the Bulletin. So basically, what they're saying is a bunch of the justices and newspapers got bribed to push a
Yeah,
narrative.
the legislature, the governor,
Yep.
and the media were all bribed to help steer the narrative. Wow, nothing's changed.
Yeah, isn't that crazy, dude? I've
Yeah,
never.
anytime, that's the Mockingbird media before it was a thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But what I actually wanted to bring up in here was, do you remember what the very last sentence of the slaughterhouse cases is?
No, I have not read that now.
Okay, so hold on. Why do I not have it in here? Descending, Justice Swain. It's in Swain's opinion.
It's just interesting to
Oh,
me that they're known as the slaughterhouse cases because right there you realize your rights have been slaughtered.
slaughtered, and that's yeah. You can tell all the name games and stuff, all that stuff, dude. And
All the name games. Yep.
hmm and this is the very last line of the slaughterhouse cases. And this is from Justice Swain's dissenting opinion. This is the very last line. I earnestly hope that the consequences to follow may prove less serious and far-reaching than the minority fear they will be. He's
Wow.
talking about the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, and he's basically saying that he really truly hopes that the outcome of this case is not going to be as serious as everyone is afraid that it's going to be.
And you read in the minority opinions because, dude, three justices wrote dissenting opinions. They don't write a dissenting opinion unless they are fucking mad, dude, and they really disagree with what is going on in this case. And you have to read the dissenting opinions in this case because who gave the first dissenting opinion? So, hold on. It was not Bradley, Justice Field. Yeah, which is one of Eric's favorite Supreme uh Court justices. Justice Field, he tears up Justice Miller's opinion. I mean, point by point by point, just completely dismantles his entire argument on how he got to where he got.
Well,
And
it's probably because, I mean, at that time also, I imagine, because the slaughterhouse cases were what,
this one was 1873. There was actually three of them.
1873, you said?
Yep, 1873 is
That's
when.
interesting because you had the Organic Act in 1871, and then
Exactly.
you had the
Yep.
Judicature Act of 1873, which basically established what I believe is the concurrent jurisdiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, they
Yep.
kind of I mean, in result, they kind of overlapped them because, it said that where there's a conflict between the rules of law and the rules of equity shall prevail. But it's like, it seems like during that time, that's when they really started migrating everything over.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it was interesting. I just started getting into Judicature Act a little bit. It's interesting literature right there for sure.
Yeah, and
Um,
there's actually I found a lot of language in the Judicature Act was adopted by a lot of the states that were not part of the original 13 colonies. A lot of states that achieved their statehood after 1873, if you read their constitution and you read it kind of in parallel with the Judicature Act, almost the identical language in the judiciary articles of each of those state constitutions.
and the Judicature Act, that's English law, right? That's not
Well,
American.
no, that was here.
Oh, was it? See, I couldn't find the one from here. I could only find the one from England, but it's the exact same year.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure because I thought there was one in England. I thought there was one here as well, but I could be mistaken.
I'll have to look a little deeper into it. But yeah, I've started looking at the one from England. Um, it's like yeah, I think what year was that? 1875?
Yeah, it was 1873, and I think it was amended a couple times, either by or in 1875.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah, actually. Which I mean, even so, it whether it's kind of interesting whether so either whether there was one in America or not. That's very interesting because the language is the same, uh, no matter what. So I'm sure if there was one in America, then it adopted a lot of the same language from the one in England.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we got off on a pretty big slaughterhouse tangent right there, but
Yeah, we did.
I do think it was an important point to hit, actually.
So I
Um,
think let me see here. The Judicature so yeah, I stand corrected. The United States did not pass the Judicature Act in 1873. The acts of 1873 and 1875 were British laws that reformed the court system in England and Wales by
hmm
merging the separate common law and equity courts into a single Supreme Court of Judicature. They were not enacted in the United States. However, the Judicature Act of 1873 influenced legal reform in the U.S., particularly in the development of modern civil procedure. The
hmm
U.S. Supreme Court and the American Bar Association studied the British reforms, especially the move towards more flexible pleading and the integration of law and equity principles. In 1875, the U.S. federal courts adopted the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which were inspired by the principles of the English Judicature Acts, such as simplifying procedures and allowing courts to apply both legal and equitable remedies.
See, so I think that's even more interesting that we didn't pass one then, because that just goes to show you the British influence over America
Yeah,
after the fucking Civil War.
especially because the American Bar Association studied British reforms, because again, the Bar Association is part and parcel of the crown, if I'm not mistaken.
See, I have heard that. I've never been able to trace that down myself, but I'm sure there's validity to that. You'd really got to dig into the initial contracts and shit and how it started, which I have a book about that actually.
But it's just interesting that the US Supreme Court and the American Bar Association were studying the reforms for the development of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which means that they were looking for a way to put in equity and at law into a merged jurisdiction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Either way, they were still working together, no matter where the fucking bar association has loyalty to. they're
Yeah,
they're still
no matter
working
what.
together. Yeah.
And so that just goes to show you that, if you're using the Judicature Act, I mean, and we see, in a lot of other places too, where they say that even though they have merged jurisdictions, you can see this in the judiciary articles in any of the constitutions that achieve their statehood kind of in the 1800s, is that they say something along the lines or to the effect that the distinctions between law and equity are hereby abolished, but the court will do its best to enforce private wrongs or provide private equitable remedies or whatever it is. And then if you look at the language that they're using in those articles, and then you look at the Judicature Act, it's almost a one for one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so even though we did not have our own Judicature Act in 1873, the language that is in a lot of these states' constitutions is borrowing almost directly from it. So similar to how Tully basically just grafts over stuff from Pomeroy and puts it in his speech. So that tells me right there that, the Judicature Act, if it was used as a base of reference or influence, then, it just tells you a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my main points about it is it's after the Civil War because after the Civil War, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. That's when Britain really took back over America.
Yeah.
And that's just what it was. I mean, after the Civil War, we were flying what's their flag called? The fucking I can't remember. But there was a British flag and an American flag up in the White House.
Wow.
Yeah, after
And
the
is
Civil
it who was the debt owed to after the Civil War? Was that when England bought the debt?
No, that's when
Or
JP Morgan bought the debt. Yeah, that's yeah, actually JP Morgan bought the United States during the Civil War.
Huh.
Yeah, he's the one who got us out of debt. Him and Nathan Rothschild worked together.
Wow, so now they have an equitable interest in the United States if they're the ones paying the
Exactly.
bills.
Exactly, dude. And I think JP Morgan is a way more central figure to all of this shit than anybody realizes.
Oh yeah, because they always pop up anytime a country owes another country massive amounts of money and there's a restructuring going on, and there's new owners and everything else changes. I mean, they're always there.
Always, 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 always. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I'm getting ready to do a pretty deep dive into JP Morgan because he's the one that's really started all this trust stuff in America.
Oh.
And he with the guaranteed trust company and all that stuff, and he started, with the hostile takeovers. They did it all through trusts.
Yeah, which it's just so interesting when you look at history. They never took control through the at law side. That's just how they maintained
Ever. Yep.
the theater, and they maintained their territories. But the actual acquisition of entire countries or states or whatever it is all done through trust law.
And they do it by being the trustees of the company and people
Yep.
not understanding what trustees are.
Yep.
You have all fiduciary power over whatever company it is when you're the trustee.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah. Anyways, before we get going, we got about 5 minutes left here. I do want to read section 399 into the record before we take off for the second hour because it is referenced in the second hour. So I think we should
Right.
read this into the record real quick. All right, so this is section 399 of Pomeroy's Equity Jurisprudence, Volume 1. And it's called Its Limitations, and that is in reference to the equity maxim we've been talking about. He who comes into equity must come with clean hands. So 399, its limitations. Broad as the principle is in its operation, it must still be taken with reasonable limitations. It does not apply to every unconscientious act or inequitable conduct on the part of the plaintiff. The maxim, considered as a general rule controlling the administration of equitable relief in particular controversies, is confined to misconduct in regard to, or at all events connected with, the matter in litigation. so that it has in some measure affected the equitable relation subsisting between the two parties and arising out of the transaction, it does not extend to any misconduct, however gross, which is connected with the matter in litigation and with which the opposite party has no concern. When a court of equity is appealed to for relief, it will not go outside the subject matter of the controversy and make its interference to depend upon the character and conduct of the moving party, in no way affecting the equitable right which he asserts against the defendant or the relief which he demands. So, just bolstering the point that we touched on a little bit earlier, the limitation is I guess you only got to have clean hands in the case. You can have dirty hands in every other aspect of your life, but as long as you come in clean to the case, well, which I guess that's not true, because if you got dirty hands in other aspects of your life, you're probably coming to the case with dirty hands. But when it comes down to litigation, they have to keep the scope of the clean hands in the actual the scope of the litigation. You can't go
Yeah.
outside.
And I also think it's interesting going back to the Bible here. They talk about iniquity in the Bible everywhere. There's the mystery of iniquity. And what we find in reading a lot of this is they're using the word iniquity in contradistinction to the word equity. And so for anybody that's going to go through and read the Bible, when you read that word iniquity, relate it back to a lot of this subject matter that, and he says right here, he that has committed iniquity shall not have equity. And so basically, if you're committing iniquity, or if you're in a den of iniquity, you're doing things outside the light of light and truth, you're being devious, you're not treating people correctly, that whole thing. A lot of it comes down to moral conduct. And the Bible does talk about that quite a lot, because that's one thing I've never really heard explained by a lot of pastors or preachers when I was kind of growing up, is what is iniquity. And I think you can truly understand what iniquity is if you look into equity, because they're opposite.
Right. And that goes back to frequency and vibration too. You can't have one without the other. And equity is the high frequency, and iniquity is the low frequency. And that is a big reason why those 2 points are brought up so much in the Bible, I think. Because it is such an amazing teaching tool for us. And I can't wait. After we get through this equity series, I want to go through the Bible and I'm reading the entire story of the redemption process in the Bible right now, and it's amazing. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about in the future for sure. And I'm going to put together a study guide for it and everything for everyone. So yeah, it's going to be really cool, man. That brings us to the end of the show though. We're going to wrap it up for this first hour here. Unless you got anything else, Whitestone.
Nope. I'm ready for hour 2. Whenever you are.
Okay. All right. Sounds good, man. We're going to wrap it up here. We hope to see everybody on the other side at the Learning Out Loud podcast.system.io. You're going to be able to check out everything there, get access to the interactive show notes, transcripts, all the reference materials, all of the referenced sections that we talk about in the podcast are going to be available over there, so you can look at them for yourselves, so you don't have to believe us. So, hope to see you guys on the other side, and never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.